Great, so assuming we are going to make a dedicated mix project rather than mixing in our music production project file, let's look at how to export the stems. As I said in the last lesson, the lines can sometimes be blurred, so you might be in the production stage and you've added this really sweet reverb, or you've sent several instruments into a bus so you can process them together. Perhaps you've done a low pass filter sweep, something like that. So how do you know what to leave until the mixing stage, and how do you avoid having to undo all of that work that you've already done in the music production stage? Well, firstly, when I'm creating effects in the music production stage, I try as often as I can to put them on an auxiliary channel for all the reasons that we've covered in this course so far. But then if I really like an effect and I don't want to recreate it in the mixing stage, which I do recommend, especially when it comes to reverbs and spatial effects that are going to place our elements within our 4D mixing space, I can actually export that auxiliary channel as a stem unto itself. So I can then mix in that as I would any other track in the mix. Mostly though, if I really like something like a reverb effect or a spatial effect that I've done in the music production stage, I will save that preset or a chain of effects from the music production stage. Then when I build my mix project, I will simply load those effects into an auxiliary channel. And I've got that great sound I love right there again to use in the mixing stage. So, over to exporting the audio. First, make sure you're 100% happy with the composition of the song and all of the elements, and that you really are ready to start mixing. And this is for the reason I pointed out in the last lesson, which is if you decide that you want to change an element of the song and you have to go back into your music production stage, export the stems again after you've made a change. This is time consuming and painstaking, and we'd like to avoid that if possible. Second is make sure that you've turned off any compressors or limiters that you are using in the music production project. This is because we want to have plenty of headroom for every element, and we don't want to get stuck with a compressed file when we can just compress the audio in the mixing stage anyway. The exception to this is if you've got a heavily compressed sound. That is a creative choice, but I would say that's quite a rare situation. But usually I would just recreate that compression in the mixing project, again by saving the preset if needs be, or just starting from scratch, which can often give you fresh perspective and actually be a good thing. Third is make sure that you turn off all sidechain compression effects. Yes, of course we're going to add sidechain compression when we're in the production stage, because sometimes, especially with electronic dance music, it can be a key part of the sound we're going for. But we're going to turn off the sidechain compressors before we export the audio, because then we can add them again in the mixing stage with more control and from a mixing mindset. It's also an effect that's very easy and quick to recreate. So the next thing to do is, as touched upon, make sure that our reverb and delay effects have been turned off, because we're going to recreate them in our mixing project. As I mentioned in the reverb lesson in the core plugins module, if you've got lots of different kind of reverbs going at the same time, things get very muddy and it doesn't sound natural, because these reverbs are indicating that different elements are coming from a different space, and we want everything to sound like it's cohesive and in the same mixing space. Now, something to watch out for is that synth patches can sometimes have a reverb in the actual soft synth. So if you go into those settings and make sure that that's turned off in the patch as well before exporting the stems. Now, the caveat to that is if it's a creative reverb effect, again, if it's something that really is part of the character of the sound that you've chosen and it's very automated and something like that, then yes, export that in the stem as well. But I'd call that creative reverb rather than spatial reverb, as their purposes are slightly different. Now, the next thing to watch out for is clipping, so make sure that none of your tracks are hitting above 0 dB. We can do the proper gain staging in the mix project, but just make sure that none of them are clipping, none of them are distorting. So when we're actually exporting the stems, make sure they are being exported at least 44.1 kilohertz, 24-bit either .wav or .aiff file. I've never noticed a difference saving things at higher resolution than that, but any less than that and you stand to lose some of the quality. So now we've got our stems, we've got our tools, let's get into building the perfect mix template. That is the very next lesson.